bar.
That extra gear, the first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.
All right, welcome to another episode of Behind the Gear, and we are joined by Leevi way over across the pond in Finland right now. But we got Leevi Kinnunen, who's a Finnish young hockey player, obviously playing junior, playing some prep school and stuff like that, or at an academy, sorry, I should say. But real quick, just to kind of preface everything, Leevi and I got connected probably maybe a month ago or a month and a half ago, just through social media. And I want to preface this because I think it's really important for young players to have the courage sometimes to reach out on social media. And you and I have chatted a little bit about this. You've reached out to a lot of different people, and we'll get into that a little bit, but, and then kind of made a bit of a connection. We had a couple good chats through email and as well as on Zoom. And I loved your story. I liked kind of just the way you were and how kind of in tune you were with skill development, getting better and improving your game. And you had some really cool questions that we'll dive into obviously today a little bit too. But first of all, how's everything going over there, Leevi? And how have you been? How's everything through this kind of weird year with COVID and stuff like that? How's everything over there?
Yeah, it's going really great. It's for sure. It's been a really weird year, and I, for example, had a 20-day quarantine not too long ago because my roommate got corona and I didn't get it, so I was kind of stuck here for a little while. But we've been really lucky here. We had the rink open for quite some time. I think we've been closed down only twice or something like this, and it wasn't even for that long period. So we definitely got the benefit over here. But regardless of that, I think it's been a good year. A little bit boring when the games got stopped, but there's always other ways to get better. So
no, totally, man. Hey, what did you do for your 20 days, like locked in your apartment or kind of in your area? Like,
oh, man.
What kind of stuff did you, because were you guys able to leave your place at all, or were you literally stuck?
No, you weren't allowed. Well, I was allowed to go for a walk because I was negative, but that was pretty much it. And that had to be done in the woods or somewhere. So,
yeah.
Well, I mean, there was some, I mean, obviously there was so much time on hand. We had school normally, so there was some school work. Mostly I was actually watching a lot of, there's a great YouTube channels where they have, certain players and they pick out all their shifts. For example, I watched all Quinn Hughes shifts from Michigan, and I watched some Owen Power and some NCAA games. I have a stick handling kind of area here, so I was working on that a lot. But otherwise, I mean, it was just waiting for it to be over.
Yeah, totally, man. Were you going a bit squirrely? Like, were you going a bit crazy? Not crazy, but you know what I mean? Like, were you going into any kind of like, because I've had to quarantine now once. We had to quarantine because one of my son, student in my son's class had tested positive. So the whole class and their families had to quarantine, even though we all tested negative. But even just being like stuck in your property or in your house for 14 days, it's long, man. And you're just like,
yeah. And especially here, like it would be a little bit different had I been home or somewhere. Yeah. But I mean, it's not the biggest apartment, I basically have a kitchen, toilet, and then we used to be 3 guys living here. One of them left home, but there was still one other here. So I was with him, and that's basically it. There isn't really much area to move. And I got to say, I was a little bit, it was starting to get to me a little bit, especially when everybody else got out, but I still had to stay, even I was negative.
Yeah.
That was a little bit frustrating for sure, but I can tell you it was a good feeling getting out.
Yeah, you appreciate everything a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, right now, you were saying before the call that you guys are on the ice a couple times a day on some days, right? So skating like 6 times a day. And where exactly are you? Like, what type of program? Because up in Canada, we do have a lot of academies. We have a lot of like situations where players are playing U18s, where they're playing tournaments, playing leagues a little bit, and then skating every day, working out most days, stuff like that. Is that kind of the same setup that you have there?
Yeah, it's called Nordic Hockey Academy. It's kind of based upon trying to take, the best parts of each academy. Like you said, there are a bunch of academies. There's Red Bull in Europe. There's Okanagan. There's a bunch of Canadian and US academies. And he who started all of this, he kind of wanted to bring something like that in Europe because there isn't really much of like only one you can maybe compare is Frölunda, which is in Sweden.
Yeah.
But he wanted to bring that, and he knew how good he really likes NCAA as a path for a player. get your education. You have extra 4 years to develop, and nobody isn't really talking about it that much in Europe. And he kind of wanted to bring the academy so you have a 24/7 program basically where you're just geared towards being as good as you can be, and then you have connections and tryouts in the US and showcase tournaments and so on. You don't really get that anywhere else.
That's awesome, man. No, that's so good. Yeah, it's such a good path, right? And that's in Norway, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And how far is that from your home then? Because I know you're from Finland, but like with that, like, yeah, how far away are you from home?
I mean, it's like I don't know, like I gotta go like maybe 3 hours on train to get to Oslo, which is the main city, and then after that fly for 1.5 hours maybe. It's not that far away, honestly, but it's still away from home.
No, and the reason I bring that up is because, in Canada, there's a lot, we're fortunate. There's a lot of areas to play hockey and stuff, but we have a lot of players that do leave home and go play junior. That's maybe 6-7 hours away, or maybe down in the States. And a lot of times people look at that like, whoa. And then we take it for granted sometimes because we talk to people in the US, you talk to people in, overseas, and no, like they're flying to games. They got to take trains to get, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where you do what you got to do to get better. You do what you got to do to get in the good situations where you're going to be able to develop and to kind of take your game to that next level if you love it,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it wasn't, I think it was a bit of a harder choice for my parents, naturally, because I left when I was, 15 or 16. I think it was 16 at the time.
Yeah.
But I've always been sort of independent and kind of took care of myself well. So it wasn't really that big of a problem at all. Of course, there is a bunch of stuff you got to do when you're suddenly living alone and kind of got to adjust your schedule and, make time for everything. You can't just focus on hockey, for example. It's kind of balancing it at all.
Yeah, and you're taking care of yourself, right? Like you're probably doing some of your meals on your own. You're making sure your laundry's done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making every meal on my own. There isn't. Yeah.
No, totally. And you're obviously a young guy who's very focused and you have a goal and you're very driven to that goal. And that's one thing that really impressed me about you. And just the sacrifices that you've made already that I'd like to get into a little bit. Like you're from Finland, obviously. At what age did you start playing, kind of getting into hockey and introduced to it? And who helped you get introduced to it? Was your parents that kind of got you into it? Was it friends? Was it siblings?
Yeah, I mean, it was honestly like I wouldn't say it. Well, I would like to say that it was kind of a natural thing. It kind of happened. My parents didn't really pressure me to do anything. They just wanted me to do, whatever I like to do. And I did a bunch of different stuff when I was a kid. And I think I was about 6 or 7 when I first, I don't know why, but I somehow remember this event really well. I remember we were watching a hockey game. It was like kind of like a local battle from 2 teams from Helsinki. It was Jokerit and IFK. And I really I don't know why, but I really liked watching hockey at the time. And then I just remember saying to my dad, I want to start hockey. And I had a few friends who were already playing hockey. And that's kind of how I got into it. And after that, I played for the same club all the way up until U16. So basically from when I was 8 years old to when I was 16. And there was kind of a core or main group of like 20 or so guys. And we played in the same team for all those 8 years. So that was really fun, I gotta say.
Totally, man. Yeah, it's different over there, right? Because you guys kind of play in clubs, right? Where you do play kind of system almost all the way up to junior or pro, right? It kind of goes.
That's also has a lot to do with why they don't talk so much in Europe about NCAAs, because the clubs naturally want you to go and play for their men's team.
Right.
And after you play there, you can't play for NCAA, most likely, unless it's a lower level league. But it's very common to stay in the same club for quite some time. I mean, there is some movement between clubs, of course, or maybe you're moving cities, but usually it's a pretty tight group of guys in the same clubs, and you get to play against the same guys almost every year. So it's always fun to see after the summer, for example, somebody's really gotten better or whatever.
Oh, that's cool. I remember we had Oli Mata was out this way for a while. He played junior here, and he trained with us for a long time. And I worked with him a lot on the ice. An awesome guy, just a workhorse. But I remember him saying, and he was like, he's been on the podcast actually, and A great episode actually with him. It went really long. It was awesome. But he talked about when he was young, hockey, he loved it, but he played a bunch of other sports. He played a ton of other stuff. He's involved in a bunch of different things. And then kind of as he got older, just was really good at hockey and loved it. And then just kind of started to really kind of pursue that. Was it similar to you as far as sports in general over in Finland, like playing different things and kind of being involved with different sports?
I played soccer for, I think, 6 or 7, and quite for some time. I mean, at some point I kind of had to choose because there was, it was getting a little bit too much of both.
Yeah.
And I did also play American football for a few years. I played ice bandy for 3 years, I think. I played floorball for some time, a little bit of basketball. Those were kind of a shorter stints, but regardless, soccer and hockey were the biggest things. But there was also like big advocacy for playing multiple sports, and I think it was a great thing done by our coaches. They would always say, if you have other sports, you don't always need to be here. You can go and do other stuff too. But at some point, when you get older, it became a little bit more serious in a way, and that's when people started kind of choosing what path do they want to take.
Oh, that's awesome. And you mentioned bandy, right? And that, for those who don't know, that's basically a style of hockey. It's not hockey, but it's a style of hockey on a huge, like, is it not like a soccer field pitch, basically? Like ice,
it is.
Right? Okay. And for like a bunch of years, I did Red Bull crashed ice. So I did like that racing downhill and just for fun, like totally good times. The guys were good, were legit. I was like a men's league weekend warrior. It's awesome. I did a bunch of the races, fun, but a lot of the guys from Europe played bandy and I didn't know anything about it. So I started asking questions like, what is this? And then I remember looking it up and yeah, you're basically skating on a huge soccer pitch and right. Like it's crazy fast. And can you explain a little bit how would you compare that? I guess for somebody who doesn't know anything about it, how would you explain that game? Cause it's a pretty cool game. And we don't have that here in North America at all that I know of.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, it's, like you said, well, first of all, you have a shorter stick and it's a ball. You're not playing with a puck, but like you said, the ice is huge. It's certainly a different type of game. And now looking back at it, I kind of also realized how it affects your gameplay. Because there you can't be. Well, let's say if you miss a guy or you angle him incorrectly, you're gone. You're not gonna ever catch him again. Then it's the next guy. You're not gonna get him anymore. And I really think that was also a great sport for skating because you just need to skate so much. And our team actually, we were really good at it. We won Finnish gold, silver, and bronze those years that we did play. It was cool. We had a great. So if you're a hockey player, you can do pretty well in it too.
And the skates are a little different, right? Almost look like like a goalie skate, longer blade.
Yeah. It's a longer blade and no curvature really. So the turns are so. But most of the hockey guys did play with hockey skates still. Okay. So it was a bit of a 50-50, but the other team, I think we were one of the only hockey teams. So we basically just came to practice whenever we could, once or twice a week, sometimes not. And the other teams that was their main sport kind of.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. And then what were your off seasons like as you got older out in kind of in Europe? Because I know here, especially with the junior guys and the pro guys, they kind of finish their seasons. They'll take a week, 2 weeks, a month off sometimes and just chill, do other things. And then usually they're back at some sort of training. They're working out, they're trying to skate, they're getting a skills coach or a skating coach, and they're, trying to get back on the ice a little bit leading into kind of those next couple months going into their season. Was it the same kind of, overward, like kind of growing up for you? Did you guys spend time in the off season training and working out and skating, or was it other sports and then come back to camp?
Yeah, no. Definitely. There is, like you said, 1 or 2 weeks off basically after the season ends. Everybody kind of just takes a few weeks to themselves. And after that, we actually train as a team most of the time for about a month and a half. And after that, we go into the so-called self-training program. So you get a program from the team usually. The team usually had a strength training coach, maybe not. And then you follow that program. Of course, there's I used to go to a ton of camps in the summer, other skating camps and all this kind of stuff. That was kind of big many years ago. And there was also these, it was a really popular camp. It was basically like a summer league where you would get all the players and they would get drafted to different teams and then they would play a tournament. And you could trade players or the coaches traded players. And it was like a whole, that was a really cool cool thing basically every summer. But I think the difference with North America and Europe is that private coaching here is not, it's not so big. I think, yeah, you're very, let's say you're either very wealthy or very well connected if you have a lot of private coaching in the summer. I mean, skating coaches is the only thing I can kind of think of, but skills coaches, I don't know too many. There are some, but I think the players who work with them are then, 16 and up, or less.
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to ask you was about training and stuff, because you'd mentioned earlier ice availability. So like for your hometown or your home country, like how many rinks are in and around where you are? Like, is ice pretty available, or is it really tough to get?
I mean, where I used to live in Espoo, it's pretty near the capital of Helsinki. There's a lot of rinks, that's for sure. And but the thing is that there are so many teams also on the contrast, and also figure skating is very big in Finland. There are some great figure skaters have come from Finland. So there's always I mean, I was never involved in the process of booking ice time, but what I understood was that there is also kind of a small battle between the figure skating clubs and the ice hockey clubs, and who gets what ice times, and when do they get it and how much. And there's a lot of users for sure. It's not like you can just pop in and say, well, is there any free ice? There most likely isn't any.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you gotta be somewhat organized to get on the ice, or have someone organizing it for you so you can get
absolutely. Absolutely. Or then you, like you said, you need to have a friend or somebody who maybe knows the rink master or whatever, and he can, in the summers usually you can book your own ice if it's possible, but during the season, not really.
Oh, that's cool. And I didn't mention it off the top. I'll mention it in the intro when I put this podcast up, but Mitch Stewart, our head strength and conditioning coach, is going to join in, and he's going to come in and we'll just join the conversation, obviously. And we'll get in a little bit of off ice conditioning and stuff like that as well. So I'm going to bring him in right now, and I'll introduce you guys quick, and then we'll keep the conversation rolling here for sure. There he is. Hey, Mitch, how's it going, buddy?
Very good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Mitch, this is Leevi.
Good.
And for those who are listening to the podcast, obviously Mitch Stewart's joining in, who's our head strength and conditioning coach. And we've got Leevi, who's over in Norway right now at an academy. And we've just been chatting about hockey and kind of where he started. He's originally from Finland, and just kind of what the on ice and stuff like that was like over there. But one thing I wanted to mention, and I'm glad Mitch is on now, because this is something that Mitch and I have tried to do more and more in our professional lives. And Levi's already doing this, so he's way ahead of you and I, Mitch, in our age right now. But is reaching out to like people on LinkedIn, people on social media. And I remember when I first talked to you, Leevi, you're like, man, this LinkedIn thing is awesome. There's so many people on it, right? And I totally agree with you. I've been on LinkedIn for years now, but only probably in the last 4 or 5 years have I really started to connect and even getting podcast guests or asking other professionals things and reaching out. But when did you start getting that mentality? Because you're young, I'm 17, 18, and you're starting already to reach out to people, and you're not afraid to send an email out and say, hey, listen, I was looking at your stuff. I'd love to connect, or I'd like to talk. So when did you start kind of doing that? Because I think more young players should be doing this. Like when you sent the email to me, for instance, originally, it wasn't in like LOLs and little like 3-letter words. No, it was well thought out. It was sentences that had, right? It had periods on it. But it was like, if you're going to reach out to a coach or a player, or someone that's maybe like over 27, 28 years old, it's nice to get something that's legible, right? So I was impressed with that, number one. But yeah, when did you start getting into this? And did anybody tell you, or anyone kind of say, hey, you should do this? Or was it something that maybe your academy talked about? Or is it just something you kind of started doing on your own?
No, it's, I think it goes kind of back to how, well, first of all, when I was a kid, I was, or let me just think how I'm going to phrase this. Let's just say that I didn't have mental health issues, but I was a perfectionist, and I still am in sort of a way. So like mental training has been very, very big for me. Like that was kind of the key that opened all of this, and, the courage to reach out to people. And so like, I always wanted to get better so bad, but I just didn't really know how. And it was mostly, the typical, what people think is hard is, waking up early and doing, thinking that quantity goes over quality. And it was the basic, because in the social medias, for example, you see so many people, at least I see, talk about, hard work, and hard work will get you there. And you need to wake up at 5 a.m. and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I feel like, or now I've realized that it's more about the quality of what you can transfer on the ice and how well you work and what are the results you actually get. Like waking up at 5 in the morning, for example, is going to help you if you're going to bed at 12 and only getting 5 hours. Then you need to go, in contrast, to bed earlier.
Yeah.
So I was always, as a kid, very passionate to get better, but I was always overthinking things. Like literally, my coaches would tell me that, I can see that you're thinking on the ice, and everything kind of took long. It was like I had like long wires in my brain because I tried to see every option possible. And I was always asking coaches, and even on the bench, I was asking, was this correct? And I kind of had that, perfectionist of, I didn't really trust myself, and I just wanted to do everything by the guidelines and making sure I was doing it correct. And that was kind of, I gotta say, destroying me a little bit before, because I was never happy with myself. Wasn't really confident, because if you're always looking for the perfect performance, it's coming very rarely, let's say. But after I got working with the mental trainer and kind of switched that around to what you were talking about now, is connecting. She just told me that, you want to know how to get better, talk to people, go and ask people. That was the first thing. My goal is to play in the North American Hockey League before entering Division 1. So she just literally told me, well, if you're so worried about it, that because I was so worried on, well, what if I don't make it? There's kids who make it, kids who don't. What are they doing differently? She just said, well, reach out to people who are there, talk to people who went through that path. And that's kind of how I got started with everything. And then I had this grand idea a few months ago to start LinkedIn, and things just blew up, and now we're here.
Oh, it's awesome, man. I think it's great. I think it's so good. And that's good advice, man. Why not reach out and ask questions? And I think, like, were you pretty surprised at some of the responses that you got? I know some people ghosted, some people didn't contact you back. That's fine. But overall, were you pretty surprised at some of the, positive, not even positive, but just some of the feedback that you got, or some of the responses that you got that, holy crap, this person actually got back to me when I sent this message out?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I've had some pretty big names too I've tried talking to, and actually who I've connected with. And I was just surprised by how, I would understand it would be different, if I was going to be the first pick in the draft and somebody comes and asks you for help. It's kind of of course they're going to help you because they're getting value out of it too. But I was really, really surprised when so many people who work with NHL guys and, Olympians, and they were just really, really eager to help and kind of wanted to help me. And most of them didn't even, they didn't ask for money or anything. They just said that, I really like the attitude, and I really just want to help. That kind of opened my mind to also the opportunity of talking, because before I thought, I don't think anybody's going to answer, but let's try. But after I saw how many people actually answered, if I wouldn't get an answer, I wouldn't really care at all. I would just move on to the next person and next person.
Yeah.
Hey, Leevi, how old were you when you started to really kind of see that perfectionism wasn't helping you? Like that it's I think having those qualities are actually, they can be good, but then that point where you recognize that you need to manage that kind of personality trait. In your best. When did you start kind of noticing that or being educated on that?
Well, I think the first introduction kind of came. It was funny. I was actually looking at photos of the first time I was in this town where this academy is started. He had summer camps here before, and I think it was 2015 or 16. So what that was like when I was
6 years ago.
Yeah, 10, 11, whatever. He talked about mental training. And he said that, people who are, this is how, let's say, Line and Ovechkin and these guys have developed. But now if you want to go through them, you need to figure out another area that you can get better at that they aren't doing. And athletic training hasn't developed as much, in the past few years that you can just suddenly have a better shot than Line, for example, even if you train as much. So he said mental training is the thing that's kind of up and rising. That kind of really piqued my interest. And that was my mental training as a 12-year-old, as I used to listen to motivational videos and stuff almost every morning. I guess kind of just hearing those things made me think more and more. And when I finally came here, one of the reasons I came here is that there is mental training here. At that point, I just really realized how important it is, because I had a few games where I played so well and I didn't understand why. And I really wanted to know, what was behind it. And then I just started reading articles and watching YouTube videos and whatnot. And then I just realized how important mental training is and started taking it seriously. And then I just tried to incorporate it into my everyday life. And I read a bunch of books, and I'm still reading a bunch of books. And I think that's honestly the biggest area an athlete could improve on. And I think I wish somebody would have taught me about that when I was younger, or somebody would have talked to me about it. Like you said, perfectionism. Yeah, perfectionism is good in its own way, but it needs to be managed like any emotion or thought, I guess.
I mean, I think 12 years old is a pretty good head start.
Yeah, totally.
Should have started when you were 4. No, that's awesome, man. I love it. I think that's such a big realization and step to take it. And you say you wish someone introduced you earlier, but we see lots of people 15, 16, 17 that may be in that same boat and are still kind of trying to figure out how to manage exactly what you're talking about. So that's awesome. It's cool.
I think honestly, man, Leevi, I think this is one of the things that I was really impressed with you. And I shared your story to some other people that I talked to you, why you randomly talked a junior kid from overseas on Zoom. I'm like, yeah, but I was really intrigued by you had some really thoughtful questions and even and just so people kind of give some context, but you were kind of reaching out, you were looking for a skills coach, someone to help you kind of work on your skills. And then after we talked a little bit, I'm like, dude, you're on the right path. I don't think you need me to do Zoom calls with you on shooting and stuff like that every day, but I'll help you. I'll give you some feedback and some stuff. And the other thing too that I think is really important is you were very, I'll pay for your time and stuff like that. I didn't want to take anything. This to me was more just connecting with somebody that, I deal with a lot of junior kids and from mostly North American kids, and just seeing how different, the European, because I find a lot of European kids can speak multiple languages. They have no problem getting on a train. They have no problem traveling. They'll fly. You know what I mean? Whereas here, kids never taken a bus before. You know what I mean? It's we're very privileged at times, right? And my kids will probably be the same. Unfortunately, I'll probably throw them on some buses, but you know what I mean? So so I was really, really impressed with that. But at the same time, I'm going to assume that your parents were a big part of this, allow and supporting you on doing this stuff. Because if I have a 12-year-old coming to me saying, hey, Dad, I got to work on my mental game, dude, man, go play soccer. What are you talking about? But to your point, that this is the biggest difference in our age now on how to make gains on other players. I 100% agree with what your coach said. And it's something that is becoming more mainstream. And I was just on a podcast the other day. We call them mental skills, not my term, but and I love it because we got hockey skills, we got training skills, we got all this other stuff. This is mental skills. It's not that you need to see a psychologist or, get on meds. It's no, you're trying to make your mind stronger. You want to overcome things. And so the fact that you're doing this and that you're kind of ahead of the game as far as anybody your age or most guys and girls your age is awesome. So yeah, no, I guess long-winded here, but how big of a part did your parents have in this as far as just encouraging you and kind of giving you some resources to be able to go get books or go do this or go to camps, things like that?
Yeah, no, definitely really, really big. I mean, like I said, they were always very encouraging, and no matter what I did, it didn't matter if it was school or and they just wanted me to be a good kid, let's say. They raised me to be disciplined and raised me to have good manners and so on. And I really want to thank them for that too. And I think that honestly, the encouragement I got for them, even though I kind of naturally had a little bit lower confidence and believe in myself when it came to many things, I think it really, really helped. And like you said, just giving me the chance to play at the level I played, paying for everything, driving me everywhere, it's something that I'm really grateful for. And, I could talk to my dad or mom about these mental things even when I was younger, and they would get interested too. It was kind of like a thing we talked about together at times.
Yeah.
And it's really, really big. And it has a lot to do also with actually done a lot of research on the brain too, and the unconscious and the subconscious and your conscious mind. And there's a time period, I think it's from when you're 6 to when you're 10, is when you're kind of in a brain state where you're really taking everything in. That's why kids are always so like, it's like they're in their own world and they believe in everything. So the things that get taught to you at that time and the things you hear, if you hear positive things at that time, it has a huge impact on you.
No, for sure,
absolutely.
man. Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, last night, for instance, I looked at my wife and I'm like, oh my God, I can't handle one more question. Cause I have a 6-year-old or 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. And it was like, I'm at school, I'm at home with them for school. They've been awesome. They're good kids. But then, at night we're having dinner and we're hanging out and the hockey game's on and like 75 questions about the game, about this, about that. I'm like, can't, but now to your point, I need to shut up and just listen and answer. And yeah, these are big years is what you're telling me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny, man. One thing I want to kind of tie in here too is you said something that I'm really big on, and I know Leevi, you and I have talked about this, and Mitch and I have talked about this a bunch, but is that quality over quantity? And I know when I was young, I probably, sometimes you go to the gym, and Mitch, you did this too. You go to the gym for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or you'd hear guys like, I spend 3 hours in the gym every day. Like now I hear that, I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Right. So even on the training side of it, Mitch, too, like how much have you changed your philosophies and stuff on training, like strength training and speed training and all that stuff into more quality over quantity?
Yeah. I mean, the very first thing that we take guys through here are different movement systems related to strength training and speed training. And that whole thing is about developing the capacity to do things with high quality, understanding the movement pattern, understanding what muscles you should feel in certain positions, understanding how to control the different aspects of your body before we even end up loading any of those things or doing them at high velocities or whatever. So it really is, the movement systems are in place to develop a foundation where you can perform things at a high quality as we start to load them. Whereas when you jump right into stuff, it's usually the path that people go down is too much too soon, sloppy. Like a lot of times we're doing 1-2 sets of things once we get into certain phases, and they're just high quality sets. It's sometimes workouts are 15 minutes in season or less. But those 10-15 minutes of work go a really long way, provided that everything's being done with intent and purpose. And to your point, 15 years ago when I was training more, it was more of the, 2-hour sessions, hour bicep curls, stuff like that. So, I mean, it's changed a lot. And obviously having the exposure to all the athletes that we have the exposure to has helped mold those systems.
And when we tie that back to skill development, I'm going to bring up a little kind of I'll butcher it, but somewhat of a quote from Leevi in one of his emails to me. But when we talk about skill development, same thing, like having good building blocks, let's say it's a snapshot. Well, having good technique, don't worry about shooting a bunch of pucks, just work on that technique, get the technique down. Then your shot's going to get way harder. And I know Leevi and I are going back and forth on stuff. And he said something along the lines of like, oh man, I've wasted so much time.
Yeah.
In training, right? Like just like you kind of have that realization, like I've wasted hours of my life on stupid stuff. And that's okay. Like that, we all done it. It's not a big deal, but realizing it at a young age and saying, man, I can speed up my development by just really focusing on the quality of my reps and of my shots or of my lifts. And that'll give me better results down the road. And I can spend more time doing other things. You know what I mean? Whether it's working on your game or whatever that is. Right. But how is your training? And I know you're a young Leevi, but how's your training even changed over the last year or 2 years on some of the stuff that you've looked at and kind of looked into and some of the people that you've talked to?
Yeah, I gotta say it's been a really big change, but it's only happened in the past few months. It was when I first found out about the concept of deliberate practice. It's in a book called Peak.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of describes, the way that experts, no matter if it's athletes or musicians or CEOs, how do they get to that point? Because like I said, what kind of bothered me before was there can be someone who works 10,000 hours on something, and then there's another kid that works 3,000, and the kid with 3,000 hours is better. So why is that? And exactly what Mitch said, working with the purpose and intent and with good focus and quality is like, I think it's the biggest kind of takeaway I have. Like there was a great article in a Finnish newspaper. I don't remember. It was an old NHL player. And he said he probably shot 20,000 pucks, on the, what do you call it? Like, outside.
Yeah.
And he said that he never got that shot in the game, not once in his career. Middle of the net, not all the time in the world, set it up nicely. It never came in the game. And I used to have that mentality too, that I kind of correlated hard or something that is physically very demanding, that's good always. But what I didn't realize is that doesn't, equal results. Like, let's say doing hill runs. Sure, you can do them as sprint work once or twice a week, but going on the hill runs for 2 hours, is that really going to make you that much better on ice when there are other things to work on, like skating and vision and hockey IQ? Like, it was a big realization for me. It's like you said, I wasted some hours, but it's good to know it now than never.
Yeah.
It's funny because like we're always kind of battling this stuff too. Dwayne, I know you've seen these things, and Leevi, I'm sure you have too, but like the 10,000 pucks a week or whatever the number is, these challenges, right? And it's the same thing in training. I'll see stuff like plank challenges and push-up challenges that people are putting out there, but it's like, it really is the exact opposite of what we're talking about right now. It's just putting in tons of mindless work, where, I mean, I truly believe, and we've seen that, I think bringing that purpose and intent can save you a lot of time and put you a lot further ahead. But the mainstream stuff is a lot of times promoting the other stuff, which is interesting.
I think it was a quote from Kobe Bryant. He said that, it's not about the hours you put in, but the hours where your mind is at practice, thinking about, what am I going to eat after? Or you're not really present. A big concept in mental training for me was mindfulness. So being in the present, really, really big impact, but so hard to do. And it's exactly that quality. Like I did a lot of skating on the outdoor ice. We had an outdoor ice for, 3-4 months almost. It was very nice, almost after every practice. But I wasn't looking at, I knew, of course, how the movement is supposed to be done. I had a kind of a training plan from my skating coach who I worked with, but I didn't ever film myself. I didn't really have a way of knowing, am I doing it really correct or not? And there was kind of a big thing that I had wrong with my skating, but I only realized it after I started filming myself and comparing it to other guys. And I'm looking like, well, this isn't looking right. It feels right to me, but it's not right. So it's another part of deliberate practice, is to get feedback. And that's kind of why I also try and talk to a lot of people. And, sometimes I'll send video over and, hey, what do you think about this? Because something can feel very right to you, but it's not wrong. And that's kind of wiring your brain too. If let's say you're skating for 1,000 hours in the winter, but if you're skating with the wrong technique, well, you're not really going to be much of a better skater. You're just going to make that even stronger and harder to put away later.
Yeah, totally.
So true, man. Yeah. And I think the video piece is really, really important. Like even just setting up an iPhone or phone, doesn't matter, iPad, whatever, on the edge of a rink and just catching your stride a little bit, or, you know what I mean? Having someone film you from the side or from behind or from the front or whatever. I think that's huge, because you're right. A lot of times, you can't see your heels kicking up, or you can't see that you're going curvy lines, or you can't see that, your shot's got a bit of a hitch in it. But then by watching that video and maybe talking to experts in that field, you'll be able to get some feedback on it. And same thing with lifts, right, Mitch? We've got a lot of players that'll film their lifts, or you'll film their lifts doing Olympic lifts that are very technical, or even doing squats. And then, I'm sure, I know for me personally, when I watch a player's film on skating or shooting or anything like that, I pick up more stuff by watching that video. I'm like, oh yeah, I could see this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Where maybe I didn't catch it on the practice, or maybe I didn't catch it during that session. But when I look at the video after, I'm like, okay, we got to work on this, And Mitch, I'm sure it's the same for you in the gym, right? You see different stuff on lifts and things like that are kind of.
Yeah, I think it's nice too, because sometimes when you're doing a movement, you can feel like you're doing it correctly. And like you said, by showing an athlete or showing yourself what it actually looks like, it can give you a little bit more, again, coming back to that purpose and intent, to develop a really clear image of what you actually look like. I know there's been a couple of times, even with myself, I've taken a video of something and looked at it after, and I'm like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
That doesn't look the way I thought.
Exactly.
I thought I looked pretty graceful, but no, maybe not.
Yeah.
It's exactly that's where I have or what I realized the problem is too, because some movements feel so natural and they feel right to us because, let's say, nobody taught you how to do it before and you think you're doing it correct, even if you saw somebody else do it. But before, for example, me and my skating, the biggest thing was left side of the screen, my skating, right side of the screen, some NHL guys skating. And you can just kind of see everything that's not aligning. But the hard part for me and why I contact other people is knowing exactly how to fix that. That's kind of the big issue at hand.
You know what? This actually brings up another important point in my head too, is because everyone is going to move a little bit differently. But something that we talk a lot about in the training center too is the fundamentals are often, or they're the same. Like the way that you load your hips, the way that you load your, whatever the pattern is, the fundamentals are the same. But then sometimes at an elite level, there's some little things that make it a little bit different. Like for example, in a sprinter, someone's knee may come across their body a little bit more than another, but you're not going to tell Usain Bolt that his knee is going in a little bit different pattern. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but the fundamentals of his foot contact, all those types of things there's a level of consistency there. Because I think some people can get wrapped up too in looking at a player that may not fit the mold of where they are. Not to say that they don't have room to improve on some things, but you can't, there's like, if you try to tell a fish to climb a tree, it's always going to think that it's stupid or something like that. Yeah. So I mean, you got to make sure that that you're being realistic with who you're comparing to and all that kind of stuff too. So all that, and that's where coaching comes into a huge play too. But yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, you've seen that maybe before, because not every player in the NHL skates the exact same.
Well,
yeah,
absolutely. Go ahead, Leevi. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't have more. I just wanted to say that like I said, when I looked into stuff, I really see that there are some fundamental differences with everybody, kind of. Yeah. Then there are, like you said, there are the main concepts that I can clearly see that, okay, most of the guys are doing this, but I'm kind of missing it.
And like, Blazer, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Like, here's an example in skating. Like, are there any players that are fast that are not going through triple extension, that aren't fully extending their stride? Like, everyone's fully extending their stride, right? Yeah. So like that's a fundamental thing. Yeah. Or like contacting under your body. Like people aren't going to be reaching out in front of their body off of a stride. That's a fundamental thing. Yeah. Whereas like maybe the angle of their foot may be a little bit different from one person to another.
Well, and even like some good examples of that is, if anyone's watched playoffs right now, you got Boston, you got Taylor Hall, who's very fast, but he's a wide tracker. So meaning his feet are a little bit wider apart under his body. They're still under his hips, but they're just on the outside of his hips. Right. And that works for him. And he's very, very fast, but yeah, he's got triple extension. He's recovering under his body. Like he's recovering, under his body. So I think there's like fundamentals that are huge and that are applicable to everybody, but everyone's going to have their own style. And also looking at how, like even Sidney Crosby, very bull-legged, always in a wide stance, which you should be, like battles down low, all that stuff. But when he takes off and skates, his feet do come together. He's in a good track. You know what I mean? And he's obviously got great speed. And so you have to be able to like understand, I think, as a skills coach too. And as a player, everybody's different, but there are things that are going to help you become more efficient. You know what I mean? If you're a player that likes to really chuck their arms side to side or skate with two hands on their stick, that's not going to help you get more speed, right? Using your arms, using those levers is going to help you. So getting your arms going kind of, back and forth a little bit more to help that momentum. Like there's things that you can definitely correct and make more efficient. But at the end of the day, everyone's a little bit different, which is totally fine. And I've even changed my views on that over the last 10 years where I almost tried to put a lot of players in a box. Like you got to look sexier. You got to look like this. Well, no, man, you look like you, and that's okay. But let's make you more efficient. Let's let's help you recover underneath. And Leo, you and I have talked about this. Mitch and I have talked about this many, many times. I think as players, especially and parents, you need to be educated consumers. You need to and if you don't know, go ask questions, because there's a lot of people out there that don't know what they're doing, and they're going to tell you to do a squat this way. They're going to tell you to skate this way. They're going to tell you to do it this way. And it's not the right way to do it. Not to say that you can't take something from that, but at the end of the day, like you're wasting time. You're learning bad habits. You're learning things that aren't going to translate to a game. And to your point about the article in the finished paper, when do you ever get a puck in between the hash marks, tape to tape pass, get it set, head up, you got about 2 seconds to let that puck go one-on-one with the goalie. Like that never happens. There's going to be a stick there. There's going to be a guy coming in on you. There's going to be a bobbling puck. You got to settle down. There's, so like you practicing that shot from the hash marks 100%. Start that way, work on technique, get it comfortable, get it good, and then add off a pass, and then add off maybe a bump, then add a stick in the way you got to pull it around. Like add those little game situations in there, because that's what you're going to get faced with more than just teeing up a one-timer from right in front of the net. It's not going to happen that much, right? So it's, I think you're right. Like it's just that deliberate practice, and it's huge, and everyone's different. And I think you got to like train to your strengths. You know what I mean? Even in the gym, right, Mitch? You got guys that are 6'5" and you got guys that are 5'8". Those are two totally different body types, two totally different, training styles, the whole nine.
And let me touch on a little parallel here between training and then say producing power on the ice. So one thing you talked about, a fundamental aspect of skating is achieving triple extension. So full extension on your stride. So in the gym, sometimes we do cleans or trap bar jumps or whatever fits that athlete. But when we're doing a clean, as an example, we're not trying to get stronger at the clean necessarily. We're loading triple extension. So that's an exercise that a lot of people do very poorly because they don't even get into triple extension. They just swing the bar up, and their ankle, knee, and hip never actually reach full extension. So to me, there is zero parallel between that exercise and developing any kind of power on the ice, because the purpose of that exercise is to load triple extension at speed. So if an athlete can't do a power clean and get through triple extension, then we're going to do something like a trap bar jump or a medicine ball jump, because now it may be a less complex exercise, but it's actually achieving what we're trying to focus on, which is loaded triple extension, which is going to translate to triple extension on the ice. So it's just having purpose, understanding what the fundamentals are. And then, my job is to draw parallels between what happens on the ice and what those fundamentals are with how we train an athlete in the gym. But that's an example.
I love it, man. That's awesome. And just real quick, for anybody who is like triple extension, for those who don't know, or young players that are listening, that's kind of your hip to your knee to your ankle. So we talked about this a lot too, Mitch, where like that ankle mobility is so important. And this is something, Leevi, that maybe you're probably aware of, but is like, and it's boring, man, to sit there with a band and work on your ankle or like roll, you know what I mean? That's boring, but man, your ankles are so important for everything that you do, skating wise, squat, all that kind of stuff. Right. So that triple extension from kind of the hips down is huge. And I love that you're saying that, Mitch, because I think more strength coaches and people that are working with other players, by translating it to what they love. So if they're playing hockey, like, hey, this is going to help your stride. Oh, wow. Okay. Now they're bought in a little bit more. Right. And this is why, because now we're going to explode from the hips to the knee, they're going to get that triple extension. That's where your stride finishes. That's where you're going to add that power, that helps players buy in a little bit more, so that when they're doing it with a dowel bar and they're like, my buddy's doing it with 45s on, I want to get the 45s on. You're like, no, you're not there yet. You need to work on this a little bit more. I think that's huge too, where you got players that are loaded and trying to do more weight, and they're not doing it correctly. And they're kind of, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like you're missing out on what you need.
100%. Yeah. And that's something we strive to try to educate players on as much as we can, is draw those parallels and help them understand, why or how those things help on the ice, which I think if you were to do those same things and even do them well, but not understand the correlation, I feel like that doesn't necessarily produce the same results as when someone has some level of understanding, not a huge level of understanding necessarily, but just kind of like, okay, I understand why this is important. I think it's good.
Yeah, no,
I think I could chime in as a player's perspective here. I really like the fact that you guys are saying that you tell players why we do something, because it was a big, like me, I do mobility work every day. I have a mobility program, and I gotta say, like, I love hockey and I love almost everything that comes with it, but I hate mobility work. Like, from the bottom of my heart, it's the worst 45 minutes of my day. But because always write down all the 4 aspects of deliberate practice before I go into the session, and I always make sure to write down, why am I doing something? How is this gonna translate on the ice? And when that kind of gets in my head, it's so much easier to just go. If it's a tough time and maybe I have a tough time focusing, I kind of can pull there and realize, well, okay, this is going to help me on ice. Let's just, let's do it as well as we can. We're already doing it. But if you don't have any idea, you're just being told to do something, let's say conditioning work, and you're not being told why and you don't like it, it's going to suck, that's for sure. And it's going to be a lot to get through.
Yeah. I think that's great. Even like and I'm sure you've done this before, Leevi, but like the beep test, right? Where you kind of from line to line. And not like that. I did that when I was a kid. We still do it with our athletes. But when I did it when I was a kid, it was try to get to the highest level you could and show how fit you were. Okay, which is fine. That's great. That's why I did it. But now the way we talk about this with our athletes is, it's going to measure your fitness level, but this is a mental grind. So you guys this is all mental for me, like something like the beep test. It's like if last year you got level 8, this year you're trying to get level 9 or 8.5 or level 10. Like it's all about mentally pushing through and going that, because you see guys all the time that drop out and then they have a full conversation after. Like you should not be able to talk when you're done this. You should push yourself to those limits a little bit. You know what I mean? So for me, like that's a simple test. I think a lot of people know, but it's changed for me as far as selling it to players as a fitness test. Let's see how fit you are. Let's see what level you can get to, or let's see how mentally tough you are. We're all athletic. You guys can all run a little bit. It's not a far sprint. So let's see how far, let's see how you guys can push mentally. And I think that's something that we've had a little bit of success with, Mitch, as far as just like getting guys to like get to that next level and helping them kind of just overcome it. And a lot of guys are, I feel anyway, and just even talking to them, they're like, holy, I didn't think I could get to that. Or, last year I only got to 8 and this year I got to 11. Last time we did it, and I think that is huge, man, is that mental, just overcoming stuff, knowing how to work hard, knowing how to put the work in,
It's actually pretty interesting because you can see it, like when an athlete just they just stop. Like, and it's like you were not even close. And so Hockey Canada, for the female program, they're very strict on their level 10. So they need to hit level 10 on the beep test. Girls will come out and they may be, ready to compete on the ice, but if they don't hit level 10 on the beep test, they'll actually fly them home. Like it's a big deal to them. And I've had a couple of the Hockey Canada girls, and there was one that she hit, I think it was 7.5 or 8 the first time. And within 2 weeks she hit her 10, but like I could see with the 7.5 that it may have been 8, but that it was 100% like a mental shutdown. Like she had so much more in the tank, and just a couple little things to talk, like how to come off the line, things to think about when you're coming off the line, like accelerating off and then just carrying that speed. And she was able to do it. So that was she didn't improve her fitness from, week 1 to week 2 or 3. It was 100% the mindset and a couple little tips of, how to transition and stuff like that. But I think there's way more value, especially at that age, like to push through a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love it. Leevi, question for you, because I talk about this a lot with young kids and talking about like 9, 10, 11, 12, about kids like not really knowing what hard work is, right? You get a kid that like maybe jogs around the block or goes and plays soccer and like, oh, they're gassed. But like, I know they got a little bit more in the tank, right? So at what age did you kind of feel that you were starting to understand hard work? You know what I mean? Like where you're kind of, because I know, and that's something I think that you can continue to work on your whole life, where you can now push a little harder. But like, do you remember any instances, whether it was a team or a workout or something like that, where you're like, man, I pushed through this. This is like, okay, this is hard work.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes all back to the perfectionist thing, because that also came with me always wanting to do the most and always wanting to be first, and
totally.
that kind of stuff. So I think it was actually from a quite young age, but that's why, coaches would tell me, I did it kind of a little bit maybe too early, where it went from play to, real hard focus. And coaches would tell me, you don't need to take it so serious yet. You can still be a kid and just play. And like, I honestly wish I would have done that for a little bit longer, but maybe I wouldn't be here as I am now because of it. But it's I think it came around like, I don't know, 13, 14, once I learned about the mental aspect. It all came. I was told that hockey is 80% mental and 20% physical, and of course I didn't understand it at the time by any means, but once you really get into mental training and you understand more about the mind and sports psychology especially, you find yourself in those situations so often. And that's when kind of the eureka moment comes and you realize, well, hey, this is a point where I just gotta push through, and this is mental. And it's always really hard to make that distinction between, is this pain, for example, like injury pain, like am I going to get injured if I keep going?
Totally.
And is it just, because I would still say probably like 95% of the time, it's just in your mind. Yeah. You're just kind of like, you just want to quit so bad at the time that you'll make up any excuse for it, let's say. Like, and once you realize and understand what is the difference between a real excuse, or I wouldn't say there's a thing such as real excuse and not real excuse, but when you find yourself coming up with excuses and you catch yourself at the act, then it's easier to kind of snap out of it and realize, okay, let's get it done. Now you're just bullshitting yourself. Like, I never liked that part where I don't like to lie or cheat to myself. I find it where I'm kind of cheating myself if I know I let myself off the hook too easy.
No, totally, man, for sure. And we talk about this a lot now, especially with our athletes and stuff, is like that voice in your head, right? And we've all got that voice in our head that, I my younger self, that voice in my head was very hard on me and like, get up, do your thing, do your workout, whatever. As you get older, that voice in your head is, you can kind of battle with it a little bit more, and it can sway the wrong way a little bit. Right. But, so I guess the question for you is like, how is that voice in your head, and how is it always been there kind of pushing you, saying, hey, you got to overcome it? Cause like you said, like, it's easy for that voice to say, oh man, it's hot out today. Let's just shut her down a little bit early today and we'll go home. Right. And then next thing you know, that voice pops back in like, come on, you're being soft. Let's go. We got to go. So yeah, what's that voice like for you in your head, and how does it push you?
I mean, it's like I said, by no means am I not perfect, and doesn't mean that I don't ever make excuses or have tough days or tough periods. It's always there. I also had to realize and go over the fact that it's not like you're just going to be perfect at one point, that you're never going to have the feeling, I want to quit, or I don't want to do this. Like, that's not realistic. You're always going to have that.
Yeah.
But what I found out with the best athletes is they just manage that emotion and kind of push through. And I'm always trying to look at it from a positive side, and kind of just, if it's really, really hard, I just like to think, okay, how is this going to help me at my game? But it's kind of in contrast with mindfulness, because one of the biggest things that helped me was like being completely focused on the now. It's not even on your next set or your next rep, like only on this rep. I think it was an Alabama football D1 coach who told it to his players, and then he wrote an article about it and said, like, being completely present really helps you get through it, because when you're kind of really focused in the now, you get into that flow state, and then you're just kind of rolling. But I think it's also very hard if you don't really love what you're doing.
Yeah, good point, man.
I like I said, I hate mobility work. No, I'm not gonna lie there, but like everything else, I'm trying to kind of go through it. This is what I really love doing, and if you can really love what you do, it's almost easy to do it at times.
You know what? Sure. I feel like when you acknowledge too that you don't like something, it sometimes can make it a little easier to just do it. If you're just like, yeah, you know what? I don't like this. That's fine, but I'm still doing it because I know it helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's you just accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
It's definitely a battle. This was something I realized a long time ago. At the end of the day, it's a battle between what do you want now and like satisfaction in this moment to satisfaction later. You want to be on your phone and get that dopamine hit for sure, but you're probably going to feel pretty bad after because you didn't do anything. Or do you want to be at the end of the season, one of the best players on your team and so on? And that's a really hard thing, especially with phones. I watched a documentary about it, how social media and all that stuff is kind of created to hook you on it. And that stuff is nuts. Yeah, it was exactly that.
Yeah,
that is really, really interesting. But if you understand how you can, like I said, if you love what you do and you can kind of trick that dopamine into what you're doing, like let's say hockey-related tasks to improve, then you kind of change the whole game.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. I think that that Social Dilemma was a great documentary, and people were just like, whoa. And I, not that I wasn't shocked by it, but it was like, yeah, no shit. Like, this is exactly like, we mentioned bicycles on this podcast and I'll get an ad pop up about a new bike that like, you know what I mean? Like it's everywhere, man. They're on us. Like people are all worried about vaccine, all this other stuff. Like they're tracking us on our phones everywhere. Like if they want to find anything out about us, it's all there. Like, you know what I mean? It is what it is. But to your point, it's like, it's bucking that stuff and just being, I guess, strong enough to be like, no, I can't, because we've all gone down rabbit holes where you just check one Instagram post. Next thing you know, you're 45 minutes on your phone. You're like, oh my, just wasted 45 minutes, you know? And what could I have been doing in those? And not to say that taking 45 minutes once in a while or half an hour and going to, you know, just kind of do mindless stuff is not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing sometimes, but being able to manage all that is huge for sure, because it can grab hold of you. Definitely.
I think that two biggest things that definitely helped me there and kind of snapped me out of it was, one, I like scheduled pretty much every day.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I have a schedule and like, you know, this is your free block, do whatever, you know, I kind of use it as a recovery purpose, for example, to scroll on social media and stuff. But then I also have every practice and every, you know, there's always intention there. And, you know, I find the funniest thing I found was after I watched Social Dilemma, a little while after that, I went and watched some type of, you know, self-development video on YouTube. I don't remember exactly what it was about, something about mental training or whatever. And people in the comments were saying, you know, jokingly saying that, cool, I'll add this to watch later. Or, you know, I'm going to procrastinate anyway. Like you realize that you're doing it, but they're still going to do it anyway. Like that's how addicting it can be.
Yeah.
Wild.
It is nuts, man, for sure. And I'll kind of finish off here. I don't want to take too much of your time, Leevi, and I appreciate coming on, and this has been great. But what for you, I guess, you know, you're very motivated. Obviously, you're very, you know, driven. You've got a good, you know, obviously head on your shoulders. But what's your plan to get to that next level? I know you mentioned, you know, trying to get a Division I scholarship, and a lot of times I think when young players say, you know what, I want to play in the NHL, or I want to play Division I, or I want to whatever. There's a lot of steps in between now and then to get there. Right. And I think you've done a really good job of like kind of not planning it all out, because you're gonna have to bob and weave and figure it out as you go a little bit. But what are your steps like for you right now, kind of where you are today and going into your off season to like, what are some of those steps? And more so just to share kind of your journey a little bit, or what your thoughts are in your journey from now till try to get to the North American Hockey League, and then maybe the USHL, and then maybe Division I or whatever happens. Right. But what are kind of some of those plans or some of those steps in place for you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I do have some sort of a plan, but I do know those plans always change, and I do have steps on how I'm going to work on everything. Like kind of the first step for me was figuring out, you know, what are the most important things for me to work on. And that's kind of actually where the whole LinkedIn thing started. I asked around like, I don't know, like maybe 10, 15 old NHL guys, like, hey, what do you think? No, this is my name. This is what my goals are. What do you think separates you and everybody else who didn't make it? You know, what separates those NHL guys? And I got a great list here. And then that really helped me put together sort of an importance list. Okay, these are the most important things I need to work on. And I think right now, the biggest thing for me, especially when getting all my mental stuff together, is to just focus on that small next step, you know, I tend to get ahead of myself a lot and kind of go hard on myself when really I just need to try and be better than I was yesterday. Like that's kind of what I try and keep reminding. Next season, I'll still be in the academy. And after that, it's I have 2 more seasons basically before juniors are over. So then I'm possibly going over to North America after next season, or then staying 1 more year in Europe somewhere. Yeah. Not 100% sure. Like, yeah, that's that kind of thing that lives. And then, but naturally, like the thing that's kind of set on stone is that I'll play my last junior year in US or Canada for sure, and go on from there.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Leevi, there's one thing I want to say that I think is just so awesome is how much ownership you take for your development. Like obviously you have coaches and you have, you know, all these people that are contributing to your plan and your thought process. But at the end of the day, I mean, I see you taking notes on stuff even right now. Yeah. Like you are taking ownership of your development path with help and guidance from other people. And you're obviously thinking about what people are telling you, and does it make sense for you and the plan that you have? Like you Yeah, I think that's something that's very admirable and something that more young players should really do is take that ownership. And taking ownership doesn't mean that you don't have coaches by any means, but it means that you take ownership for it.
Yeah.
You're not just going through the motions of what other people are telling you to do. You're doing it with purpose, which is awesome.
One thing on Mitch's point I want to highlight with Leevi, and just because I got to know him a little bit over the last little while, is you've reached out to a lot of people. You've had conversations, you've had email exchanges, you've had social media exchanges. One thing I think is really important for people, parents and players to understand, and we're talking hockey right now, is there's a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about that are professionals. There's a lot of people that are going to give bad advice. So I think, and I know you don't have to mention any names, but you and I have talked about like certain people, and it's like, this person is like a high level, whatever, but I had a conversation with them and I kind of knew more about the field than they did, or I knew more about skill development or whatever it is. Right. So I think it's also part of reaching out to people and getting advice, which is awesome, but sometimes not taking everything as the gold standard, or not, trying to get people that you do trust and that you do, that do give you good advice. You know what I mean? And it's not easy to find, but I think, after having a couple conversations with a used car salesman, you'll be able to tell if they're a good used car salesman or if they're just trying to sell you a lemon. Right. So I think that's really important too, when you're going through and just kind of cold calling, because that's really what you're doing. And what I do on social media too is like, hey, I don't know you, but hey, I'd love to chat with you. You seem really interesting, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. But then once you get to know that person, like, that wasn't exactly what I thought this was going to be, and I think it's important to really do your homework, obviously, but then, kind of do that real personal test where you can kind of that bullshit meter where you can see who's really full of crap or who's, kind of telling some good stuff. And I know you've gone through a little bit of that on your journey here.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I used to be very gullible. Let's say as a kid, I used to believe I wanted to believe everything, but one thing I really had to learn the hard way too was, one coach used to tell me, I really liked it. He said, you got to kind of, not take everything with a grain of salt, he said, and just take the things that are good for you. I think there was a moment when I talked about skating with two different people, and they gave advice that were both like, they were contradicting each other. It was two completely different ways of doing one thing. That's where I was like, well, what am I supposed to do now? I don't know. How do I? This is what I was looking for.
Yeah.
But you said you have to have that bullshit meter on all the time, and kind of.
It's a good lesson to learn early.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for anybody would just to use your own brain. It's not that hard usually to see the difference if somebody is. No. But it's so hard in a way. If, let's say, there's something, you're a kid and you don't know anything about how to practice stick handling, and you go and you contact people, but you have no idea how is it supposed to be. So it's very hard to also make the distinction between, could this be wrong? Could this be right? So I think it's important, if some young kids get inspired here, is to also have their parents help them in a way, or somebody who knows hockey, I would say.
Right. And look, let me kind of ask you this. So when you are reaching out to people, just going back to that, how are you figuring out who you want to reach out to? I mean, obviously you're looking at profiles and you're looking at probably trying to if I meet anybody and I don't know them from Adam and they're a professional in this or professional in that, what's the first thing any of us would do? We just Google them, right? And we just look up and see what's out there. And if you find nothing, you're like, okay, that's kind of weird. If you find a couple of videos or articles or whatever, you're like, okay. So how did you go about kind of, finding the people that you wanted to kind of reach out to or kind of contact?
Yeah, well, it kind of started, like I said, when I had that important list together, what are the most important things I should work on? I just tried to find people in that field who work with, very high level players, or some, that's kind of how I started at it. And then there's so many people to talk to, and I kind of try and look at, do they have some players who they're working with, or like you said, how's their profile? Like, it's a lot of kind of factors that go into it, but it's not that hard to figure out who you need to talk to. But usually, like the most, let's say, high profile people, they don't always answer.
Yeah.
But there's so many good people out there who are really, really knowledgeable, and actually had a few kind of, let's say, surprising ones where, there weren't any big names on their list, or, even any NHL players, but still they turned out to be like so informative and very helpful. So it's I think I just send a lot of messages, but after the conversation gets going, that's where you kind of realize, is this maybe for me? Maybe it isn't.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's great. Last thing I'm gonna ask, I'll ask you two more things. But one thing, what did you find out on your list when you got some feedback from NHL players? What even just like two or three things that they said, like, hey, these are things that are kind of high level that you should definitely have this if you want to be me.
Yeah.
One day.
Well, pretty much all of them said skating. That was a big takeaway. Second thing that came along a lot was hockey IQ or hockey sense, what they call it. And that kind of ties in with vision. They didn't say vision, but skating and hockey IQ were things that pretty much everybody said.
Yeah.
From what I can read here. The third thing was just skills, puck skills, skating skills, kind of combining all of that. And then the last thing that still everybody mentioned was some type of mental trick or mental thing. It was many different things. Many people talked about competitiveness and competing every day. Many guys talked about the internal process and being focused in the present. And biggest thing was that, you need to trust yourself and really believe in yourself that you can make it. But I would say that those were the biggest things, like skating, hockey IQ, skills, and the mental game. And that's kind of how I also base my whole thing around. I mean, those are big development areas, obviously, but it kind of lets you cut through some of the stuff that you maybe did before that you realize, okay, maybe this isn't so crucial.
Right. Oh, that's awesome, man. That's really good. And if you had to go back, I kind of always ask guys this, but if you had to go back and talk to yourself at like 9, 10, 11, kind of when you're starting to get serious and starting to like take hockey more serious, what would you tell yourself like now? What would you tell that young guy now? Like, even if you're talking to a young boy or, someone that's similar to you that was, maybe a little bit too serious at times and stuff, but what would you go back and tell them now?
I don't know. Maybe I think the first thing I would tell is to just, relax. It's all going to be like, not stress so much about everything. And like I said, just try and have more, as much fun with it as you can. Like I gotta say, like, even though I'm a young guy, like I realize how quickly years go by. Like I feel like, especially the past few years, have gone by so quick. Like I still remember when I first moved here and when I left home, and it feels like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
I would just say to appreciate every moment a lot, and just realize that time does go by fast, and you want to really make the most out of it.
Love it. No, that's great, man. That's awesome. Mitch, I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to throw in, but
no, I'm really glad that you guys had me out and to chat a little bit. Leevi, it's awesome to meet you. I want to mindset down how you're taking that, again, the ownership piece of that I think is so huge, and I love it. It's awesome.
Thank you. It was great meeting you.
Yeah, that's awesome, buddy. Yeah, and if you ever need anything, obviously we'll be in touch, I'm sure. And if you ever need anything, don't be afraid to reach out for sure. So thank you very much for jumping on, buddy. I appreciate you taking the time, and
thank you.
Yeah,
no problem. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Take care.
To kind of raise that bar.
That extra gear, the first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.